Jurassic Park was a groundbreaking film in many ways. It set a new standard for special effects and earned dinosaurs a renewed respect in the mainstream. The Lost World Jurassic Park had its narrative flaws, but was overall a solid follow-up to an iconic classic. But how will a third film fare, especially with no pre-existing source material and someone else in the director's chair? Let's find out by taking a look at Jurassic Park 3. To my delight, the film shifts focus back to Dr. Alan Grant, who is struggling to continue his paleontological research in spite of everything that happened to him on Isla Nublar. He still keeps in contact with Ellie, who has since settled down. One day, the wealthy Paul and Amanda Kirby offer Grant a significant sum of money for his research in exchange for his services as a guide on an aerial tour of Isla Sorna, Site B from the second movie. He agrees to go, and accompanying him is his friend Billy, an aspiring young paleontologist. In reality, though, the Kirbys are looking for their son, Eric, who went missing 8 weeks earlier while parasailing near the island. As you might expect, the trip goes awry and results in the party becoming stranded on the island, with danger lurking around every corner. As you can tell, there's not much new here. By now, the scenario begins to feel formulaic. Some poor saps get stranded on an island and get chased around by dinosaurs. I wonder what said dinosaurs must be thinking at this point.
Not that I'm complaining about a free meal, but why do these suicidal people keep coming back?
Well, in actuality, the reason for going to the island this time around is pretty basic. There is minimal setup in the beginning. The film just seems dead set on getting these characters to Isla Sorna without establishing much about them or the story beforehand. In fact, that's a recurring problem with the whole movie. The pace is simply too fast. The majority of the dinosaur encounters are chase scenes. Very rarely does the film ever stop to build suspense, tension, or any sense of wonder. A large part of this can be attributed to the noticeably shorter runtime, which is about half an hour less than the first two flicks. It comes across as a much smaller and more isolated story than the previous entries. The plot has nothing to do with InGen, the animals, or the island as a whole. It's just about this group of unrelated people getting stuck in the worst place on Earth. As a result, the tale lacks the thematic depth that the series is praised for. There's no message about man tampering with nature. The film could have made a statement about what parents would be willing to sacrifice for their children, especially when it finally slows down toward the middle, but this is never really touched upon. Also, in contrast to Steven Spielberg, Joe Johnston directs these scenes in a much more frantic fashion. Many of the shots are significantly shorter, and there are a slew of rapid cuts during the action sequences. Although the direction as a whole is fairly competent, the movie just lacks the steady-handed finesse of its predecessors. The characters are also a mixed bag. However, I do have to give credit to the solid acting, especially from the returning stars. Sam Neill gives a wonderfully sharp and charismatic performance as Dr. Grant, my favorite character from the first film. He's honestly one of the most compelling aspects of this movie, thanks in part to his internal conflict. Even though he detests the negative effect that John Hammond's dinosaurs have had on paleontology, he just can't suppress his fascination with raptors. In spite of the danger, the scientist in him simply can't resist observing these animals in action. On top of being beautifully conveyed through Neil's understated performance, this conflict is elegantly summed up in one piece of dialogue about astronomers and astronauts. The other returning character is Ellie Sattler, who disappointingly settled down with someone else. Despite this, Laura Dern still has an endearing chemistry with Neil and brings a likably supportive intelligence that helps her leave a pretty positive impression given her limited screen time. But let's get to the new characters, the best of which is Billy. Alessandro Nivola pulls off the youthful enthusiasm and naive curiosity, but it never becomes too obvious or in your face. Much like Neil, he opts for a more subtle approach, a little bland at first, but leaving a positive impression overall. Then we have the Kirbys. They're charming people as far as kidnappers go. Okay, they're not completely despicable, but that mainly has to do with the appeal of the actors more than the script. William H. Macy is fine, but there's not really much to his character other than the fact that he's a wimp. Likewise, Téa Leoni is alright, but there's also not much to her character except that she has a strong maternal instinct. She also screams a lot. kind of like another blonde in a Spielberg franchise. Granted, these two occasionally get some development when they reflect on mistakes they've made and try to tell themselves that their son is alive, but these moments are few and far between. Speaking of their son, I find it extremely hard to believe that he survived 8 weeks on his own. At least Trevor Morgan gives a decent performance, following this franchise's record of surprisingly accomplished child acting. There are a few other humans in the movie, but they're not around long enough to leave an impression. I'll give you one guess as to why that is. That's right, they get eaten. And I'd be lying if I said it wasn't entertaining. In spite of the quick cuts, many of the action scenes are well staged and enjoyable. These sequences are further enhanced by the impressive effects. Even though the CGI somehow looks more dated than the previous movies, probably because the dinosaurs are out in broad daylight most of the time, the animatronics remain pretty spectacular. However, this may just be a personal nitpick, but I have an issue with one particular sequence. When the Spinosaurus and the Tyrannosaurus Rex finally face off, the T-Rex is killed in about 30 seconds. I don't like that. When I saw this as a kid, I was devastated. Throughout the series, the Tyrannosaur has been established as the ultimate source of predatory power. It's become every bit as iconic as the movies themselves, and here it just gets completely destroyed. Well, at least the music makes me feel better. Despite basically copying the style of John Williams, Don Davis still delivers a dynamically energetic musical score that stays true to what we've heard before. Does that mean that this movie is as good as the first two films? Well, while it's definitely the weakest of the series, it's still something that I can enjoy watching. It's a popcorn flick, and when it comes to popcorn flicks about dinosaurs, I've seen worse. I've seen far worse. When all is said and done, Jurassic Park 3 is a terribly flawed yet admittedly fun film in the franchise. While it suffers from an overly familiar story, a rushed pace, hit or miss characters, and less narrative and thematic substance than its predecessors, it benefits from admirable performances, thrilling action scenes, and effects that, for the most part, are as convincing as ever. It may not pack the punch of the previous films, but it does make for a fairly exciting ride if you can look past its faults. Thanks for watching. Feel free to like, subscribe, and/or comment. Until next time.